episode of Codo Cinema, the podcast show where I talk about movies. I'm your host, Mark Codo, aka Codoman. For this episode, I'm going to talk about will be one of the greatest Disney animated films of all time, Walt Disney's Fantasia. Now, Walt Disney's Fantasia is a 1940 American animated musical anthology film produced by Walt Disney Pictures with story direction by Joe Grant, Dick Huemer, and production supervision by Walt Disney himself and Ben Sharpstein. It consists of 8 animated segments set to the pieces of classical music conducted by Leopold Stokowski, 7 of which are performed by the Philadelphia Orchestra. Music critic and composer Deems Taylor acts as the film's MC, otherwise known as Master of Ceremonies, who introduces each segment in live action form. Now, of course, the animated segments are directed by Samuel Armstrong, James Alger, Bill Roberts, Paul Satterfield, Ben Sharpstein, David D. Hand, Hamilton Lusk, Jim Handley, Ford Beebe, T. He, Norman Ferguson, and Wilfred Jackson. Story by Joel Grant and Dick Huemer, while Walt Disney and Ben Sharpstein served as the producers. And as I mentioned, it features Leopold Stokowski and Deems Taylor, with cinematography provided by James Wong Howe, and of course produced by Walt Disney Pictures and distributed by RKO Radio Pictures. This movie was released on November 13th of 1940 with a runtime of 126 minutes. And the film's budget was at $2.28 million. Now, to give you more production on this movie, Disney settled on the film's concept in 1938 as work neared completion on The Sorcerer's Apprentice, originally an elaborate silly symphony cartoon designed as a comeback for the role of Mickey Mouse, who had declined in popularity. As production costs surpassed what the short could earn, Disney decided to include it in a feature-length film of multiple segments set to classical pieces with Stokowski and Taylor as collaborators. The soundtrack was recorded using multiple audio channels and reproduced with Fantasia, a pioneering sound system developed by Disney and RCA Radio Corporation of America that made Fantasia the first commercial film shown in stereo and a precursor to surround sound. Fantasia was first released as a theatrical roadshow that was held in 13 cities across the U.S. between 1940 and 1941 by RKO Radio Pictures. The first began at the Broadway Theater in New York City on November 13th of 1940. While acclaimed by critics, it failed to make a profit owing to World War II's cutting off distribution to the European market. The film's high production costs and the expense of building Fantasound equipment and leasing theaters for the roadshow presentations. Since 1942, the film has been reissued multiple times by RKO Radio Pictures and Buena Vista Distribution, with its original footage and audio being deleted, modified, or restored in each version. When adjusted for inflation, Fantasia is the 23rd highest grossing film of all time. So prior to its re-release, the film was re-released and it made about $76.4 to $83.3 million on a budget of $2.28 million. That's the re-release. So that's the re-release of Walt Disney's Fantasia. So when adjusted for inflation, it made $945,407,375 at the box office. So this movie, when adjusted for inflation, made over $945 million, becoming the 23rd highest grossing film of all time in the U.S. That's amazing right there. And of course, with the popularity of Fantasia, the Fantasia franchise has grown to include video games, Disneyland attractions, and a live concert series, A sequel, Fantasia 2000, co-produced by Walt's nephew, Roy Disney, was released in 1990. It was released in 1999, and Fantasia has grown in reputation over the years and is now widely acclaimed as one of the greatest animated films of all time. In 1998, the American Film Institute ranked it as the 58th greatest American film in their 100 years 100 movies, and the fifth greatest animated film in their top 10 list. In 1990, Fantasia was selected for preservation in the United States National Film Registry by the Library of Congress as being culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. Now that's amazing right there. Now I will give him my own background on this movie plus the production history, and we will break down this movie. We will break down this movie between the production of each segment, between the production of each segment, while also talking about the segment as a whole as well. So starting out with the production, so there were story meetings and program selection for this movie. So Deems Taylor was the film's master of ceremonies who introduced each segment in live action scenes. The program for this movie, which is basically titled The Concert Feature, was assembled in a series of meetings in September of 1938. Disney made story writers Joe Grant and Dick Humer gather a preliminary selection of music, and along with Stokowski, Taylor, and the heads of various departments, discussed their ideas. Each meeting was recorded verbatim by stenographers, with participants being given a copy of the entire conversation for review. As selections were considered, a recording of the piece was played back at the next gathering. Disney did not contribute much to early discussions. He admitted that his knowledge of music was instinctive and untrained. In one meeting, he inquired about a piece on which we might build something of all prehistoric theme with animals. The group was considering The Firebird by Igor Stravinsky, but Taylor noted that his Les Secrets du Printemps would be something on that order, to which Disney replied upon hearing a recording, "This is marvelous. It would be perfect for prehistoric animals. There would be something terrific in dinosaurs, flying lizards, and prehistoric monsters. There could be beauty in the settings." Numerous choices were discarded as talks continued, including Molto Perpetuo by Niccolo Paganini, with shots of dynamos, cogs, pistons, and whirling wheels to show the production of a collar button. Other deleted material included Prelude in G minor and Troika by Sergei Rachmaninoff, and of the Song of the Flea by Modest Mussorgsky, which was to be sung by Lawrence Tibbett. On September 29, 1938, around 60 of Disney's animators gathered for a 2.5-hour piano concert, while he provided a running commentary about the new musical feature. The final pieces were chosen the following morning, which included Toccata and Fugue in D minor by Johann Sebastian Bach, Cydalise et le Clavier Pied by Gabriel Pineri, The Nutcracker Suite by Peter Lich Tchaikovsky, Nine on Ball Mountain by Modest Mussorgsky, Ave Maria, Dance of the Hours, Clair de Lune by Claude Debussy, The Rite of Spring, and The Sorcerer's Apprentice. Disney had already begun working out the details for the segments and showed greater enthusiasm and eagerness as opposed to his anxiety while starting on the problematic Pinocchio, which also came out the same year as Walt Disney's Fantasia. However, one of the songs was removed, and that was Clair de Lune, and Disney and his writers encountered problems of setting a concrete story to Cydalise. Its opening march, The Entry of the Little Fawns, attracted Disney to the piece, which at first provided suitable depictions of fawns he wanted. On January 5, 1939, following a search for a stronger piece to fit the mythological theme, the piece was replaced with sections of Beethoven's Sixth Symphony called the Pastoral Symphony. Stokowski disagreed with the switch, believing that Disney's idea of mythology is not quite what this symphony is about. He was also concerned about the reception from classical music enthusiasts who would criticize Disney for venturing too far from the composer's intent. Taylor, on the other hand, welcomed the change, describing it as a stunning one, and saw no possible objection to it. The new feature continued to be known as the concert feature or musical feature as late as November 1938. Hal Horn, a publicist for Disney's film distributor RKO Radio Pictures, wished for a different title and gave the suggestion Philharmonic Concert. Stuart Buchanan then held a contest at the studio for a title that produced almost 1,800 suggestions, but the favorite among the film's supervisors was Fantasia, an early working title. Horn said, "It isn't the word alone, but the meaning we read into it." For the beginning of its development, Disney expressed the greater importance of music in Fantasia compared to his past work. "In our ordinary stuff, our music is always under action, but on this, we were supposed to be picturing this music, not the music fitting our story." And that's what Walt Disney said. And Disney had hoped that the film would bring classical music to people who, like himself, had previously walked out on this kind of stuff. Now that is very true right there. Now to continue, this will lead into the segments. More than 1,000 artists and technicians were used in the making of Fantasia, which features more than 500 animated characters. Segments were color keyed scene by scene, and so the colors in a single shot would harmonize between preceding and following ones. Before a segment's narrative pattern was completed, an overall color scheme was designed to the general mood of the music and patterned to correspond with the development of the subject matter. The studio's character model department sculpted three-dimensional clay models, so the animators could view their subject from all angles. The live-action scenes were filmed using the three-strip Technicolor process, while the animated segments were shot in successive yellow, cyan, and magenta exposed frames. The different pieces of film were then spliced together to form a complete print. A multi-plane camera that could handle 7 levels, 3 more than the studio's original model, was built specifically for the film. Fantasia has 3,500 feet, which is 1,100 meters of multi-plane footage, more than Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs and Pinocchio combined. Now that's the production history right there for the film as a whole. Now, just to give it my own background, I actually saw this movie for the first time when I was in middle school. Like, I was in the 6th grade. I actually got this for Christmas in a double feature with Walt Disney's Fantasia 2000. And I actually got that. I actually got the double feature of Fantasia and Fantasia 2000 as a Christmas present from my grandpa Oris D. Herrera when me and my family were on winter break and we were celebrating Christmas in Walsenburg, Colorado, and one of the gifts was a movie, and it was from my grandpa Oris, but I think it goes something like this: to the Codo boys from Mickey Mouse. I was like, Mickey Mouse gave me and my brothers a movie, huh? I wonder what could it be. Well, it turns out it was Walt Disney's Fantasia and Fantasia 2000, which is a huge surprise. And on top of that, I didn't realize this was a thing. I didn't know there was a Fantasia movie that came out in 1940. I didn't know that because I grew up watching Walt Disney's Fantasia 2000 on home video, and I remember watching that movie. I really enjoyed that movie. Like, you're letting the music and visuals tell the story, right? There's no dialogue during those musical segments. It's all sound and visuals. That is it. That's what makes it amazing too. And you're all in it, not just for the animation, but for the music as well. The musical choices that they have made, that the Walt Disney Company has made, some of the most amazing musical compositions out there. and that's why I liked it, including The Sorcerer's Apprentice. But with 1940s Fantasia, I didn't know that film exists until I got it for Christmas, and I started watching it on DVD when I was home when I was home when I was home. I was 12 years old when I watched the first Fantasia movie, and I'll be honest, I really enjoyed that movie. Although that movie alone felt really long. It was a long movie. Like I had a hard time watching it all the way through. Just to be quite honest, because like I said, I didn't know the first Fantasia movie existed, and I was waiting for those segments to be over. But now I'm older, I'm kind of used to it. But now I'm older, I'm kind of used to it, and I already got a general idea of what's going on in each segment. Also to add, I am also a musician, to which I play violin, and I've been playing violin since the fourth grade. And I have also studied audio recording technology and music, which is a music concentration at my university, which is Eastern Illinois University, and I have looked into the bit of a history for many different composers out there, and some of these composers I recognize. Some of the composers and their compositions that were used in Walt Disney's Fantasia and Fantasia 2000, I recognize some of these composers. Plus, I think it also helped too that I also grew up watching Little Einsteins as a kid. Little Einsteins is a Disney Channel show which was actually on Playhouse Disney, to which many compositions from many great classical composers were also provided for the Little Einsteins as well. When it comes to Fantasia, when I think of Fantasia, I always think of The Sorcerer's Apprentice. The Sorcerer's Apprentice, arguably the best segment to come out of Walt Disney's Fantasia. With Mickey Mouse as the sorcerer himself. And I believe that is amazing right there. So, anyway, we're going to talk about the songs, and we're also going to break down the production history of those songs, plus my overall thoughts on this movie. So, anyway, obviously enough, we are going into the opening of this movie. So the film opens up with live action scenes of members of an orchestra gathering against a blue background and tuning their instruments in half light, half shadow. So obviously this is basically everybody warming up their instruments, right? Like this is an orchestra. This is the Philadelphia Orchestra that is performing. This is the Philadelphia Orchestra that is being provided for Walt Disney's Fantasia. And of course, in the sequel, the orchestra that was used in Walt Disney's Fantasia 2000 was the Chicago Symphony Orchestra. The first one was the Philadelphia Symphony Orchestra. So anyway, we get the Master of Ceremonies himself, or MC, Deems Taylor, who enters the stage, also in half light, half shadow, and introduces the program. The music has three kinds of story. First is a kind with a definitive story, and then the first is a kind with definitive stories and narratives. Then there's a kind with no story, but definitive pictures, and the third kind, more abstract ideas, like music that exists for its own sake. The 8 animation sequences are colorful, impressive, free-flowing, abstract, and often surrealistic pieces. So the first number of the night in Walt Disney's Fantasia is Toccata and Fugue in D minor by Johann Sebastian Bach. And this song opens up with Leopold Stokowski conducting the orchestra in live action shots of the orchestra illuminated in blue and gold, backed by superimposed shadows, and it fades into abstract patterns. Animated lines, shapes, and cloud formations reflect the sound and rhythms of the music. That's Toccata and Fugue in D minor. Now, the second one is the Nutcracker Suite by Peter Lich Tchaikovsky, and selections from the ballet underscore scenes depicting the changing of the seasons from summer to autumn to winter. A variety of dances are presented with fairies, fish, flowers, mushrooms, dressed in Chinese attire, and leaves, including the numbers, Dance of the Sugar Plum Fairy, Chinese Dance, Arabian Dance, Russian Dance, Dance of the Flutes, and Waltz of the Flowers. The next song is basically The Sorcerer's Apprentice, and that was composed by Paul Dukas, based on Goethe's 1797 poem, and this segment features Mickey Mouse, the young apprentice of the sorcerer Yensid, which is, funny enough, Disney in reverse. And Yensid attempts some of his master's magic tricks but does not know how to control them. The Sorcerer's Apprentice, with Mickey Mouse as the title character, brings a broom to life to carry water for him, but forgets the magic formula to make them stop and ends up flooding the whole castle. Now, the next one is The Rite of Spring by Igor Stravinsky, a visual history of the Earth's beginnings is depicted to selected sections of the ballet score. The sequence progresses from the planet's formation to the first living creatures, followed by the reign and extinction of the dinosaurs. Terrible Lizard in Greek. Journey of prehistoric Earth from molten lava to single-celled organisms to a surface filled with marine life and then dinosaurs who rules for 200 million years, which are depicted to have been rendered extinct due to a drought. And after Rite of Spring, there was an intermission, and that actually features the Fantasia title card. And after the intermission, there is a brief jam session of jazz music led by a clarinetist as the orchestra members return. Then a humorously stylized demonstration of how sound is rendered on film is shown. An animated soundtrack character known as the soundtrack. Initially a straight white line changes into different shapes and colors based on the sounds that were played. So like for example, you got the drum being played, you also got the harp, the bassoon, the trumpet, the violin, any other instruments you could think of that can, that can be rendered for the sound, right? Rendered and synchronized for the sound, right? So the next number is the Pastoral Symphony by Ludwig van Beethoven, and it's basically a mythical Greco-Roman world of color centaurs and centaurettes, cupids, fauns, and other mythology creatures and other figures from classical mythology of Mount Olympus is portrayed to Beethoven's music. Then a Greek Odyssey with Pegasus, baby Pegasus learning to fly, half man, half horse, which is centaurs, male and females, which is the females are the centaurettes, going bonkers over each other. Zeus having fun hurling lightning bolts made by Vulcan at which the lightning bolts are being thrown at them. And then the sun god Apollo riding his chariot to bring day, and then the goddess of night Morpheus spreading her cloth to engulf the sky into the embrace of darkness. The next number, Dance of the Hours by Amilcare Ponchielli, a comic ballet in 4 sections. Madame Apanova and her ostriches, morning, Hyacinth Hippo and her servants, afternoon, Elephantine and her bubble-blowing elephant troop, evening, and Ben Alligator and his troops of alligators, in the night. Ballet dancing conducted by elephants, hippos, and ostriches. The ballet is attacked by crocodiles, also in ballet, and is overridden by them. But eventually the elephants, hippos, and ostriches fight back and take their stage back. The finale finds all the characters dancing together until their palace collapse. Now the last 2 numbers is Night on Bald Mountain by one of Russia's famous composers, Modest Mussorgsky, and Franz Schubert's Ave Maria. And of course, at midnight, starting with Night on Bald Mountain, the devilish Chernobog awakes and summons evil spirits and restless souls from their graves to Bald Mountain. The spirits dance and fly through the air until driven back by the sound of an Angelus church bell, as night fades into dawn, which segues into the Ave Maria. A chorus is heard singing Ave Maria as a line of robed monks is depicted walking with lighted torches through a forest and into the ruins of a cathedral, which ends with the morning sunlight. And that is basically it. That is the breakdown of this movie. Now, overall, this movie is really, really good. On my own thoughts, I enjoyed this movie. Now, first time watching this, I enjoyed it, but I'm going to have to be completely honest. When I was little, I did not appreciate the runtime for this movie. Like, this movie is 126 minutes, right? And it almost felt like I was watching a 3-hour movie, and I'm just wondering, when is this song going to end, right? Like, each segment I am listening and watching, like, it sounds really good, but at the same time I'm wondering, when is it going to end? Like, I almost lost patience at one point, but at the end of the day, but at the end of the day, it really grew on me. Like, this movie grew on me, and I began to appreciate it for what it is, because like I said, I'm a musician myself, but also, like, when I started studying more and more about music, the more I study on music, the more I like, okay, I see where they're going with. I can see where they're going with. Like, when it comes to, like, a certain song or a composition, like, I'm thinking about, maybe it's like 5 minutes, maybe it's just 5 minutes. Nope. Sometimes it can go longer. It can go like 10 minutes. Heck, maybe hour at the most, you know? In fact, the Rite of Spring in Walt Disney's Fantasia is the longest of the bunch. Like, the runtime in the Rite of Spring for Walt Disney's Fantasia is 22 minutes and 29 seconds, while the Pastoral Symphony for Ludwig van Beethoven is basically 22 minutes and 25 seconds. So, the Pastoral Symphony and the Rite of Spring tied for the longest music compositions in Walt Disney's Fantasia. That is amazing right there. If you look past the runtime on this movie, you'll appreciate for what this movie is trying to do, right? Like, this is the first Fantasia movie, and this is not your typical fairy tale. This is not your typical Walt Disney animated feature film that is adapted from a fairy tale. This is its own thing, right? Fantasia, Walt Disney's Fantasia is its own thing, despite the animated segments and the song and the compositions that are being used in this movie, right? I really, really appreciate what this movie is trying to do. We even get some dialogue. We even get a little bit of dialogue between Stokowski and Mickey Mouse at the end of The Sorcerer's Apprentice, which was actually really good. Which is actually really good. Few seconds of that, and such. Twitch I think is pretty cool. And if I were to rank this movie, I give it a 9 out of 10. I'm all in it for the visuals, the music. That's basically the whole point of Walt Disney's Fantasia. You're here for the music, and you're basically here for this movie. It's basically the musical composition with this type of free form that you are seeing and hearing from this movie. And that is amazing right there. Now, let's get into the production of the segments, shall we? So, starting with Toccata and Fugue in D minor by Johann Sebastian Bach. Now, I like this one. Now, this one I really enjoyed. In fact, I did an assignment on this about Johann Sebastian Bach. I think it was a research paper. It was a research paper that I did for one of my music classes in college, and Toccata and Fugue in D minor was one of the songs I did. Although mostly Johann Sebastian Bach, but I did mention Toccata and Fugue in D minor because obviously Walt Disney's Fantasia, and of course I actually did another research paper on Igor Stravinsky, and of course referring to the Rite of Spring as well. To which I actually did pretty well on both of these papers. So, anyways, going to Toccata and Fugue in D minor, Disney had been interested in producing abstract animation since he saw a color box by Len Lee from 1935. He explained the work done in Toccata and Fugue was no sudden idea. They were something we had nursed along several years, but we never had a chance to try. Preliminary designs included those from effects animator Cy Young, who produced drawings influenced by the patterns of the on the edge of a piece of sound on the edge of a piece of sound film. In late 1938, Disney hired Oscar Fischinger, a German artist who had produced numerous abstract animated films, including some with classical music, to work with Young. Upon review of 3 reels produced by the two, Disney rejected all 3. According to Humor, all Fischinger did was little triangles and designs. It didn't come off at all. Too dinky, Walt said. Fischinger, like Disney was Fischinger, like Disney, was used to having full control over his work and not used to working in a group. Feeling his designs were too abstract for a mass audience, Fischinger left the studio in apparent despair. Before the segment was completed in October 1939, Disney had plans to make Toccata and Fugue an experimental three-dimensional film, with audiences being given cardboard stereoscopic frames with their souvenir programs, but this idea was abandoned. Now, to be quite honest, there isn't much to see in Toccata and Fugue in D minor. Plus, it was the first composition to open up with, just to throw this out there. And the visuals really tell the story, to be quite honest. Like, you're in it for the visuals for this opening number, right? And I really appreciate what I really liked in that musical number is that part of it was live action. You're seeing all the musicians playing, right? You're seeing all the musicians playing. Like, we're being introduced to the musicians playing, segueing into the animated part where it's just basically, abstract colors, right? Along with some images of violin bows and bridges as well. Ending with the sunlight and waves going in the air, transitioning back to Leopold Stokowski conducting the rest of the orchestra for this opening number. So going to the Nutcracker Suite, animator Art Babbitt is said to have credited the Three Stooges as a guide for animating the dancing mushrooms in the Chinese dance routine. I believe it's the dance that Curly does, right? Doing the whoop 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 whoop. I think that's what it is, right? So anyway, Babbitt drew with a music score pinned to his desk to work out the choreography so he could relate the action to the melody and the counterpoint. Those nasty little notes underneath, so something has to be related to that. The studio filmed professional dancers Joyce Coles and Marjorie Belker wearing ballet skirts that resembled shapes of blossoms that were to sit above water for dance of the flutes. An Arabian dancer who was also brought in to study the movements for the goldfish in Arabian dance. Jules Engel, who worked on the choreography and color keying for this sequence. To avoid hard ink outlines, new techniques like transparent paints was used on the cells. The snowflakes used in the Snowflake Fairies sequence was difficult to draw by hand, so a man named Leonard Pickley from the special effects department came up with the idea of using stop-motion animation. Diagrams of real snowflakes were traced by the ink and paint department, who used a material a little heavier than regular cells and painted them in translucent white. They were then cut out and placed on revolving spools attached to small steel rails. The mechanics was hidden under black velvet as the snowflakes were moved one frame at a time. The hand-drawn animation was added later. Now that's amazing right there. Like it's actually nice. And now this one I actually recognize because when I was little, I was still in elementary. Now I was in elementary school. I actually saw I want to say, North Central College's production of the Nutcracker Suite, and I think either that or maybe it was a visiting show, something like that. But nevertheless, the Nutcracker Suite I actually recognized. I and I now and also I actually watched Walt Disney's Fantasia in preparation for for this recording, and a part of me was disappointed that two of the other segments from the Nutcracker Suite was not included in this movie, which was the overture and the march. You know, the overture that opens up the Nutcracker Suite. Dun bum ba 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 da 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 ba ba da. That one, and then you have the march theme as well. Bum ba 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 bum 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 ba 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 bum 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 bum. That theme for the march. I was disappointed that those segments were not included in the Nutcracker Suite for Walt Disney's Fantasia. But I still enjoyed this. I still enjoyed the Nutcracker Suite for this movie. But I can't. But to be fair, I really wish the march and the overture were included. Just make it more complete, right? I'm just saying. I'm just saying. But I think but I don't know the reason why. But they probably didn't include it. Maybe it was for time purposes or money purposes or something. I don't know. But nevertheless, I still enjoyed the Nutcracker Suite. I thought it was pretty cool. I thought it was pretty nice. Good to listen to around the holidays too, right? Now the third one, The Sorcerer's Apprentice. Everybody knows this one. The Sorcerer's Apprentice. Like to anybody who has seen Fantasia, you know The Sorcerer's Apprentice is arguably the best song in this movie. Like, you cannot go wrong you cannot go wrong. I mean, you have no idea. I mean, when it comes to Fantasia, The Sorcerer's Apprentice comes to mind. It is arguably the best composition to come out of Walt Disney's Fantasia. And to back up this claim, and to back up, there's more history about The Sorcerer's Apprentice because it was originally going to be a short. It was originally going to be a cartoon short film, right? It was originally going to be a cartoon short film. So, in 1936, Walt Disney felt that his cartoon studio's star character Mickey Mouse needed a boost in popularity as newcomers Donald Duck and Goofy had become a new favorite amongst audiences. He decided to star Mickey in The Sorcerer's Apprentice, a deluxe cartoon short based on Goethe's poem of the same name, and set to the orchestral piece by Paul Dukas, also inspired by the original tale. Although Disney had explored the concept of matching animation to classical music since 1928 with his silly symphony cartoons, he wanted to go beyond the usual slapstick in those shorts and produce ones where sheer fantasy unfolds. Upon receiving the rights to use the Dukas piece in July 1937, Disney considered using a well-known conductor to record the music for added prestige. He happened to meet Leopold Stokowski, then the conductor of the Philadelphia Orchestra, at Chasten's restaurant in Hollywood, and talked about his plans for the short. An enthusiastic Stokowski informed Disney that he liked the piece and offered to conduct for free. Now, to continue with this, Disney's New York representative met Stokowski on a subsequent train journey and reported the conductor was serious in his offer and had some very interesting ideas on the instrumental coloring, which would be perfect for an animation medium. Disney felt all steamed up over the idea and thought the partnership would be the means of a success and should lead to a new style of motion picture presentation. He had already begun working on a storyline outline and wished to use the finest men, from color down to the animators, on the new short that was to be promoted as a special and unique film outside of the Mickey Mouse cartoon series. So Stokowski signed on back in December of 1937 a contract with Disney that allowed him to select and employ a complete symphony orchestra for recording of The Sorcerer's Apprentice, and was paid $5,000 for his services. The 3-hour recording session began at midnight on January 9, 1938 at Culver Studios in California, with 85 Hollywood musicians. When production costs surpassed $125,000. That is as much as 4 times greater than the average silly symphony. And of course, Dizzy and his brother Roy, who managed the studio's finances, realized that the short could never earn such a sum back on its own. Roy urged his brother to keep additional costs to a minimum because of its very experimental and unprecedented nature. We have no idea what can be expected from such a production. Ben Sharpstein, a production supervisor on Fantasia, recalled that Disney saw this trouble in the form of an opportunity. This was the birth of a new concept, a group of separate numbers, regardless of their running time, put together in a single presentation. It turned out to be a concert, something novel and of high quality. So, The Sorcerer's Apprentice, just to add on, it was going to be its own thing, right? A short film with Mickey Mouse. And that was just to, get the popularity of Mickey Mouse back, right? So the ideas were expanded The Sorcerer's Apprentice and produced a full-length feature film which began in 1938. Thus, this is the birth of Walt Disney's Fantasia, right? It was basically coming from the idea of The Sorcerer's Apprentice being a short film, leading into the idea of like, hey, let's do a full-length feature film with The Sorcerer's Apprentice, but with other musical compositions, right? I think that is amazing right there, folks. Even Dean Taylor was paid $1,440 per week during his 1 month visit while doing Walt Disney's Fantasia. And Stokowski was also paid $80,000 plus royalties for his service. To continue on with The Sorcerer's Apprentice, so James Alger was the director of the segment, assigned animator Preston Blair to work on the scene when Mickey Mouse awakes from his dream. Each of the 700 members of the staff at the time received a synopsis of The Sorcerer's Apprentice, and were encouraged to complete a 20-question form that requested their ideas on what action might take place. Early on, Disney considered using Dopey from Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs as the apprentice, but he did not want to dilute the impact of his debut feature and chose Mickey Mouse, who was redesigned for the film. I think that was a smart move to use Mickey Mouse because, like Walt Disney said, like the Mickey Mouse was in a decline in popularity, so he wanted to bring Mickey Mouse back to the fold, to gain more recognition, right? So then later on, Stokowski suggested the cartoon could star an entirely new personality that represented in the mind and heart of everyone seeing the film their own personality, so that would enter into all the drama and emotional changes of the film in a most intense manner. Disney rejected this also. In its original form, the segment opened with an overture followed by live-action shots of Stokowski conducting in silhouette, filming for which took place in January 1938 with cinematographer James Wong Hall. So layout artist Tom Kodrick created what Dick Humer described as brilliantly colored thumbnails from preliminary storyboard sketches using gouache paints, which featured bolder use of color and lightning than any previous short. Mickey was redesigned by animator Fred Moore, who added pupils to his eyes for the first time to achieve greater ranges of expression. Most of the segment was shot in live action, including a scene where a UCLA athlete was asked to run and jump across one of the studio's sound stages with barrels in the way, which was used for reference when Mickey traverses through water. Each silent film actor, Nigel de Bruyere, was hired to portray Yinsid for the camera for the animators to use for reference. A sorcerer's robe and hat was brought from a costume rental shop and decorated with stars and crescent moons. And the rest was history for The Sorcerer's Apprentice. Like I said, The Sorcerer's Apprentice is arguably the best part of Walt Disney's Fantasia. Like Mickey Mouse basically, takes the sorcerer's hat to wear and of course, tries to do magic powers by bringing the broomstick to life to do chores by carrying buckets of water to a cauldron. So he's carrying water from what looks to be a well all the way to a cauldron, right? And of course you get the music itself. Bum 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 bum. That's basically the Sorcerer's Apprentice. The march itself is basically a march, right? It's basically a march that's going on where where Mickey and the broom are basically, doing the chores. It's just one broomstick, right? Unfortunately, when Mickey falls asleep and dreams of becoming the most powerful sorcerer in the world, right? He daydreams about it until he wakes up to his entire room flooded with water. Tries to stop the broom, but of course he couldn't do it until he chops the broom with an axe in half. Like he like Mickey Mouse just turns from an innocent mouse to an aggressive rodent and chops the broom into itty bitty pieces, leading up to the broom coming back to life. But unfortunately, it creates more broomsticks. Like, how, like, in Greek mythology, you got the Hydra creature, right? Like, if you cut off one head, two more takes its place. But with a magic broomstick, you chop it into itty bitty pieces, more will grow back. And Mickey Mouse learned that the hard way. And the entire broomstick army brings buckets of water to fill up the cauldron while the entire room was filling up completely with water. Like, and the broom's going underwater while while the Sorcerer's Apprentice march is going on in the background. Like, I'm just wondering, how are these brooms still alive? Like, these brooms, they're magic. They are magic. Like, they're just doing their job, right? I'm pretty sure those broomsticks are getting paid for this, right? Even to the point where Mickey was about to drown in a whirlpool with the magic book until the sorcerer himself, Yensid, comes back wondering what's going on and uses his magic powers to stop the flood, right? And then of course takes the broom that is put back together and just hits Mickey Mouse once and the music ends, right? I actually like the look on Mickey's face when, as he's about to walk out with the buckets, he looks at Yensid, the sorcerer, and he gives like a little smile. Like Mickey gives him like a little smile, even though he's embarrassed. He's basically embarrassed, but he's like, haha, and walks out until the wizard like hits him from behind with the broom, right? And that's where the song ends, leading to where Mickey shakes hands with Leopold Stokowski, right? He's just saying, huh, 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 I like my congratulations, sir. That's what he says, and then he was like, ha, so long, I'll be seeing you. So that's the Sorcerer's Apprentice. When you think of Walt Disney's Fantasia, you think of the Sorcerer's Apprentice. But of course, this leads into more compositions, like The Rite of Spring, for example. Now, The Rite of Spring is basically the longest of the bunch in this movie. I mean, so is the Pastoral Symphony. We'll get to that pretty soon. So The Rite of Spring, there was an early concept for it, and was to extend the story to the age of mammals and the first humans in the discovery of fire and man's triumph. John Hubley, the segment's art director, explained that it was later curtailed by Disney to avoid controversy from creationists who promised to make trouble should he connect evolution with humans. To gain a better understanding of the history of the planet, the studio received guidance from Roy Chapman Andrews, the director of the American Museum of Natural History, English biologist Julian Huxley, paleontologist Barnum Brown, and astronomer Edwin Hubble. Animators studied comets and nebula at the Mount Wilson Observatory and observed a herd of iguanas and a baby alligator that were brought into the studio. The viewpoint was kept low throughout the segment to heighten the immensity of the dinosaurs. Now, I really appreciated what was going on in The Rite of Spring, but there's also some stuff to break down too. Most notably with composer Igor Stravinsky. Now, Igor Stravinsky, when this movie came out in 1940, Igor Stravinsky was the only living composer to see Fantasia in the works and the premiere. However, he didn't like Leopold Stokowski's recordings of The Rite of Spring, as the animators cut out some of the segments of the piece. Although his initial response was generally positive, but he later expressed dissatisfaction due to the unauthorized edits to the score. Now I can understand where Igor is coming from, because when you mess with the segments, when you have segments going out of order, you can understand it can be annoying, right? Which is something that Igor Stravinsky didn't appreciate, right? I guess he was kind of expecting more to be in more order, right? Kind of like what his ballet had, his original ballet had. Although, yeah, again, let's be honest, the Rite of Spring when it first came out, it was, let's just say, it was a troubled composition as well, which led to a riot. But other than that, I do appreciate what this segment was doing. Like, it's just basically it starts off in outer space to the creation of Earth, and of course, I actually liked, the volcanic destruction that is going on. How like each rhythm and the musical instruments like represents like the volcano, the volcano explosion, right? Like you get the brass section representing, the lava being popped from the ground, like dun 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 bum 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 bum. That like that. I really like that right there, including the bassoon, including the bassoons as well. Some of the woodwinds, including the bassoon, did the lava bubble pops as well. Also, even during the earthquake sequence where the brass section did like the like that's when all the rubble started to rise from the ground during the earthquake, right? And then this leads into obviously the single cell organisms coming to the land. I thought that was pretty cool. And to any Star Wars fans out there, John Williams took inspiration from the Rite of Spring for some of his key compositions in Star Wars: A New Hope, which obviously enough is basically the part where it goes da 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 da. That's the part that was also played in Fantasia. So John Williams took inspiration from Igor Stravinsky's Rite of Spring for some of Star Wars: A New Hope, and of course Gustav Holst's The Planets as well. But the dinosaur sequences was pretty cool to see, especially the fight between the T Rex and the Stegosaurus. Like the Stegosaurus picked up a good fight, but unfortunately the T Rex gained the upper hand, leading into the extinction of the dinosaurs. Like that part was really sad. Like seeing the dinosaurs go extinct, and the music is monumental and depressing too. Like it goes from dun bum we leading into something monumental like bum 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 dun dun bum 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 bum. That is what was going on in that segment right there. It's really sad too, and to the point where some of the dinosaurs like disappeared into the dust, and some of them literally like fell into the tar pit too, right? Like that is sad. That is sad. I mean, that is so depressing to watch, right? But anyway, that's basically the Rite of Spring right there. And then of course I've already mentioned the soundtrack. We go to the next one. We go to is the Pastoral Symphony. Now, I thought the Pastoral Symphony was okay. I mean, the colors and the characters were pretty cool too. And I think this predated Walt Disney's Hercules a little bit, if I were to take a wild guess. But anyway, the Pastoral Symphony, according to Ward Kimball, the animators were extremely specific on touchy issues. The female centaurs were originally drawn bare-breasted, but the Hays office enforcing the motion picture production code insisted that they discreetly hung garlands around the necks. The male centaurs were also toned down to appear less intimidating to the audience. Originally, the segment included a pair of black centaurs who tended to the others, but these were cut from the film in later releases due to their implications of racism. And those were the black centaurs, Sunflower and Otica. Sunflower and Otica. Like, those two black centaurs were cut from the film in later re-releases due to the implications of racism. Yes, this is the controversy this is like a little bit of that controversy that is going on for Walt Disney's Fantasia, is basically the inclusion of those black centaurs, right? Now, to be quite honest, now I have never seen the original release of Fantasia, but to be quite honest though, it does get me wondering, why were these characters included in the first place? Now look, I don't mind these characters being in this movie, but knowing how this is the 1940s, right? This is way different. 1940s, like back in the day, guys, keep in mind, back in the day, Walt Disney was a lot different. The Walt Disney Company was a lot different back in the day, right? Especially when it comes to like animation and how to like put in like certain characters and of course skin color as well. Just to let y'all know, it's a lot different back then. But of course, it's not without its flaws, and I can understand where people are coming from. But also at the same time, it doesn't really help that these characters were removed, because it's supposed to show you that, okay, sure, yes, what the people over at Walt Disney did was bad back then, it's still bad today. But of course, cutting it out of the movie, pretending that it doesn't exist, does not help. It doesn't help either. So basically, it doesn't help. Even if they were, and now if they were not in the movie, that's a different story. But having it in the movie for the first time, but later cut out for re-releases, does not help. Okay, even if you want to keep the two, even if you want to keep those characters, that's fine. Maybe change up their facial features. I mean, don't change the skin color. Just maybe just like, tweak it a bit. Change the facial features a little bit, right? Now, this is just from my point of view. If I were making this movie back in 1940, if I were making this movie, but here's the thing. I did not make this movie. Walt Disney did. The man himself, Walt Disney, did it back in the day. Okay, so the Black Centaurette character called Sunflower, was polishing the hooves of a white centaurette, and a second named Otica briefly appeared during the procession scenes with Bacchus and his followers. Now, this was initially removed for a 1963 rerun of the Disneyland episode Magic and Music, which originally aired uncut in 1958. Disney himself approved of the changes. Now, of course, yes, he approved of the changes, but why did he include these characters in the first place? Although, let's be honest, to be fair, I don't think he knew what he was getting into. I mean, that's just my opinion. But to back this up, when I saw Fantasia for the first time on DVD, I didn't know about these characters, but what I found out, especially during the procession scene, is the carpet being unraveled. It's being unrolled by itself. So, who did it? Was it magic, or was there someone else? But apparently it was Otica, the Black Centaurette, who unrolled the carpet, right? And unfortunately, that character was cut. So apparently, there was some, explosion to it. So yeah, someone unrolled. So who unrolled the rug? It was a Black Centaurette named Otica. Right there. So it's like, so basically, that is a continuity error right there, because obviously, you may think, oh, this carpet is being unrolled with magic. Nope, there was a centaurette unrolling the carpet. So yeah, but anyway, that's enough about that. So, but I'm pretty sure there's gonna be a lot of people who have different opinions on these centaurette characters. But yet again, we do get centaurette zebras, right, in the Pastoral Symphony introducing Bacchus, right? So you got centaurette zebras, right? But anyway, that's enough about that. But anyway, that's enough about that part. But yeah, we do see Bacchus and I believe, what is his name? Dionysus, doing the what is it? Is it Bacchus? Probably Bacchus, or maybe Dionysus, setting up the procession celebration until it gets interrupted by a thunderstorm with Vulcan and Zeus, playing, target practice, I guess. I guess Hercules said it best from Pain and Panic. Oh man, Zeus is doing his target practice on us. I do like how that composition gets a happy ending too. Let's move forward to The Dance of the Hours, which was directed by Norman Ferguson and Thornton Heat, and was completed by 11 animators. Most of the story was outlined in a meeting in October of 1938, including the creation of the main alligator character, Ben Alligator. Oh, very clever. Alligator. Wink, wink, alligator. See you later, alligator, and a wild crocodile. Its story direction, layout, and animation underwent several rewrites. Yet Disney wanted to present animals performing a legitimate caricature ballet sequence with comedic slips. The design of the elephants and alligators were based on those by German illustrator Heinrich Klee, while the hippos and ostriches were based on those by cartoonist T.S. Sullivan. To gain a better idea of the animals' movements, the crew visited Griffith Park Zoo in Los Angeles. Animator John Hench was assigned to work on the segment but resisted as he knew little about ballet. Disney then gave Hench season tickets to the Ballet Russe di Monte Carlo with backstage access so he could learn more about it. The studio filmed several people in live action to help with the animation of the characters. The lead ostrich, Mademoiselle Apanova, is based on Irina Baranova. And then Hyacinth Hippo, the prima ballerina, was inspired by dancers Marge Champion and Tatiana Rybachinska, and actress Hanny Noel, who weighed over 200 pounds. The animator studying the least quiver of her flesh, noticing those parts of her anatomy that were subjected to the greatest stress and strain. Rybachinska's husband, David Lichin, was used for Ben Alligator's movements. And that's pretty much it for Dance of the Hours. That was a pretty fun segment to watch as well. Especially love how at the end, I like how at the end with all the alligators, I think they're supposed to represent I think they were supposed to be ninjas of some sort, but the way how they all come out with their red cloaks, I thought that was pretty clever, just to be sneaky and scary, right? Until the other alligator comes in and just has fun, and just to come in to have fun, right? And of course, dancing with the hippo, right? I wonder if the hippopotamus is hungry, right? It's hungry, hungry hippos! Hungry, hungry hippos! Hungry, hungry hippos! Hungry, hungry hippos! But anyway, let's move forward. So now we move on to the last two musical numbers, which is Night on Bald Mountain and Ave Maria. Night on Bald Mountain was directed by Wilfred Jackson, and its story closely follows the descriptions that Modest Mussorgsky had written on his original score of the tone of the poem. Chernobog was animated by Vladimir Bill-Tytla. His design inspired from a pencil sketch by Swiss artist Albert Herder of a demon sitting atop a mountain unfolded its wings. Despite Herder never producing animation for Disney, the studio temporarily hired him to produce pencil sketches for the animators to gain inspiration. Chernobog and parts of the segment were developed further by Danish-born illustrator K. Nielsen. Tytla conducted research on all the characters he had animated, and being Ukrainian, was familiar with the folklore that the story detailed from. Actor Bela Lugosi, best known for his role in Dracula, which came out in 1931, was brought in to provide reference poses for Chernobog, but unfortunately the references were rejected, and Wilfred Jackson decided to pose shirtless, which gave him the images he needed. At one point in its development, the idea of using black cats to represent evil was considered, but Disney rejected it as he thought cats had always been used. Now, Night on Bald Mountain, that's basically the penultimate segment leading into Ave Maria. That alone is considered to be one of Disney's darkest and scariest moments. Like, Night on Bald Mountain, the music is amazing, but it is scary at the same time. Seeing the devilish Chernobog summoning his evil spirits, and it's basically, it's a hellish tone, right? Like, it opens up in the dark of the night, right? And the devilish Chernobog summons his evil spirit to come on top of Bald Mountain for a hellish evening, right? And on top of that, Deems Taylor even opened up saying, Bald Mountain, according to tradition, is the gathering of Satan and his followers, which is basically referring to the devilish Chernobog and the evil spirits from the dead, right? And the creepy imagery is so creepy and hellish. Like, like all the soul, like all the creatures and the souls of the damned are basically, doing this hellish dance in front of the devilish Chernobog, right? And many of them falling into the fires of hell. They're basically on top of Ball Mountain, like, we're worshipping this evil devil. This is considered to be one of Disney's darkest and scariest moments. But unfortunately, good triumphs over evil because this segues into Ave Maria because of the church bells ringing 6 times. And if you pay attention, the church bells ring 6 times, which indicates that it's 6 o'clock in the morning. So basically, dawn is approaching, right? Chernobog and all the evil spirits go back to their graves, right? And then we get and then dawn approaches, segueing into Ave Maria, and it provides an emotional relief to audiences tense from the shock of Night on Ball Mountain. At one point, Disney did not want much animated movement, but wanted the segment to bring the background artwork to the forefront, which became a showcase for the multi-playing camera. An early story outline had the segment end with a Madonna presented on the screen with the clouds, but Disney decided against this as he did not want to suggest overly religious imagery. There were ideas of releasing scents throughout the theater during Fantasia, including the smell of incense during Ave Maria. Now, the final shot beginning with a black foreground and a shining white light in the background measured 217 feet of film. According to Disney historian John Culhane, this was likely the longest continuous scene in animation history to date. Ed Gershman, who worked on the segment, described how the animation of the procession figures was so closely drawn. A difference in the width of a pencil line was more than enough to cause jitters, not only to the animation but to everyone connected with the sequence. The jittering created on the first shoot led Disney to order a time-consuming and expensive redo. The studio had no camera that moved slowly and continuously enough to fill the segment, as Disney wanted, so a custom horizontal camera crane was built that accommodated glass panes 4 feet wide with the artwork painted on them so they could be shifted out of the way as the camera tracked through. Workers shot continuously for 6 days and nights, but following processing, they discovered the camera was fitted with the wrong type of lens and had photographed the track stands and themselves. 3 days into the third reshoot, a minor earthquake rocked with the wooden stands and panels that kept the glass panes in place. Rather than carry on with the risk of the jittered footage, they started over for a fourth time and completed 1 day before the film's premiere. The finished film was rushed to New York on a charter plane and spliced into place with 4 hours to spare. That is basically it. That is basically all the segments right there. And Ave Maria was a good way to close out the whole movie, right? Ave Maria, the song that's basically the triumph of good over evil, right? That is a great way to close out Walt Disney's Fantasia, and of course, closing out Night on Ball Mountain to add in an emotional relief to audiences tense from the shock of Night on Ball Mountain. Now, of course, obviously enough, Disney sound effects artist Jimmy McDonald was actually on timpani along with composer Paul Smith on violin. Plus, you also got Benny Goodman, who's basically who's basically a part of this as well. And also, Ub Iwerks was rehired at Disney Studios as a technical supervisor for special visual effects as well. Especially the handshake between Mickey Mouse and Leopold Stokowski. And that's basically it. That is it. That is my breakdown on Walt Disney's Fantasia. Now, I know that was a lot to talk about, but hey, at the end of the day, I still enjoyed this movie. I really enjoyed this movie for what it is. It's a visual, I want to say, in my opinion, it's a visual marvel. Like, you're letting the visuals, the animation, and the music tell the story. There's no dialogue, just sound and visuals. That's the whole point of this movie. And that is basically it. And that is basically it. That is my take on Walt Disney's Fantasia. Now, this movie is celebrating its 85th anniversary. So, this movie is turning 85 years old. And that is amazing. 85 years later, it holds up to this day. And this movie, along with Fantasia 2000, I believe this movie should be shown in class. In music school, in film schools, including regular classes for music and film. This should be shown, giving people an idea of what this movie is and how like the animation is being brought to life, including the music as well. But anyway, that is about it for this episode. So to anyone who is listening, what did you guys think of Walt Disney's Fantasia? Did you like the movie? Did you not like the movie? Did you think the movie was okay? Did you think this movie hold up after 85 years? I would love to hear your thoughts. But anyway, that is a wrap on this episode. Thank you all for tuning in to Codo Cinema. I'm your host, Mark Codo, aka Codoman. Remember to watch movies and stay positive.